Welcome back. I'm Dan,
I'm Joe.
and today I'm going to emphasize on something, a recent meme or saying I have heard around. I've seen people say the term, no one is illegal on stolen land. Now, I have different views than either the hard left or the hard right when it comes to immigration. As far as saying no one is illegal, well, most countries have laws. Most countries have immigration laws. As in, you must get either a visa or something along those lines to go and work in that country. You must also pay taxes in many cases. Now, I'm for people being able to come legally, easily. Yeah, that's right. People who can come easily, legally, that'd be great. As far as the stolen land part, I can only think of a few places in the world that are not stolen, as in nobody lived there before people came and sailed to those places. But first, I want to get into some other places. For example, during the Umayyad Caliphate, when the Arab world spread out, nowadays Arabs occupy most of North Africa as well as the Middle East. Arabic's the most common language there. At one time, though, it wasn't the case. They spread out and they took the land from someone else. I'm not going to go and tell the Arabs, if I ever go to any of those countries in North Africa, I'm not going to say, hey, this is stolen land. No. If in Constantinople, now known as Istanbul, it used to be the quote unquote seat of Christendom. Well, the Seljuk Turks, who were Muslims, seemed to think otherwise, and they took it. And now it's not. I'm not going to go and call Istanbul stolen land. No, the Turks won it because they were stronger. Ayatollah Palace in Tibet is considered holy and sacred to Tibetans, Tibetan Buddhists. It's where the Dalai Lama once lived. Well, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, seemed to think otherwise. Now, who was right, who was wrong? Doesn't matter who was right, who was wrong. It matters who was weaker and who was stronger. And the CCP was obviously stronger. But by the way, speaking of which, when I mentioned Arabs earlier, they weren't only the offenders, they were also victims. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad was ransacked in, I think, the early 13th century by the Mongols. Mongols took it, but the Mongols no longer rule the Middle East. Nowadays, a Mongolian citizen must get a visa, I think. The only places I can think of that were never stolen were, okay, one country, Sao Tome and Principe, that's one country, as well as Cabo Verde, also known as Cape Verde, which are off the west coast of Africa. When the Portuguese first sailed there, nobody lived there. You see, who live there today are DOSs, descendants of slaves, just like in the Americas. So no, those weren't originally stolen. And the Maoris, when they sailed to what is now New Zealand, about 500 years before Europeans came, that nobody lived there at that time, so they got there first. Now, getting there first is one thing. Holding it's another, just like the Khoisan in South Africa. They were the first known people to have lived there, but the Zulus came and eventually took them over. Was one right and one wrong? No. Nobody sprang from the ground like grass, and nobody coalesced like ether. And by the way, I'm quoting a movie called Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. In fact, the land Joe and I both live in, Thailand, this wasn't always the way it was. It was once part of the Khmer Empire. And later on, the Siamese Empire took them over. But for a while, Siamese were ransacked in Ayutthaya, 1762, and they had to move the capital to Bangkok. So eventually they got Ayutthaya back, but it was never the same. So there is no land I've ever set foot on that was not stolen from somebody else. And yes, Thailand has immigration laws, strict ones at that. China has immigration laws. Let's see what else. Much of the Arab world has immigration laws. I think all of it does. And Turkey has immigration laws. So I'm not gonna go and challenge any of them and say, hey, how could you? This was once someone else's territory. No. Just about all land in this world that you will set foot on was stolen from somebody at some point. Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
I agree. I mean, yes, there's a lot of atrocities that happen. Immigration, of course, in a lot of places in the world today is a hot button issue. But the fact is, most countries modern day have tough immigration law. Like you mentioned a few minutes ago, Thailand. Look, I like being in Thailand. You like being in Thailand. But guess what? We had to be here. We have to follow the law. Mm-hmm. Every 90 days, you check in. There's yearly visas. There's limits to when tourists how many times a year they can come into the country. But we're guests, so we have to play and follow those rules.
That's right. When I was living in Turkey for a little while, I had to play by their rules. I didn't like all their rules, but I thought if I'm gonna live there, or at least try to, I gotta abide by certain things. There are certain things I could not even say out loud over there. And anyways, though, that's all I have to say for the moment. Joe?
But what about modern immigration in America? What do you think?
I have a whole other video that I want to do on that one.
All right, sounds good. We'll wait for that then.
All right. So anyway, folks, please like, subscribe, share, and bang the notification bell.
All right. Have a great day or night, folks, wherever you're at.